21 Criminal Justice Committee meeting of the New Orleans City Council is hereby called to order. We will have to operate under the COVID-19 pandemic requirements, which does not allow us to meet personally. As a refresher, at the beginning of the council, staff will read the agenda in its entirety. It is also online at council.nola.gov. Anyone wishing to comment on any agenda item should go to council.nola.gov and fill out an online public comment form. Public comment will be limited to 1 comment per person per item. Comments should be limited to 2 minutes when read aloud and be germane to the agenda item at hand. The public comment will be closed at the end of the 10-minute public comment period. This will be announced and no written comments will be accepted beyond that point. Before voting on any agenda item, the council staff will read any public comment received for that pending item. So with that, if we could please have the roll call.
Councilmember Banks, Chair, present. Councilmember Moreno. Councilmember Gisselson Palmer. Councilmember Nguyen.
Present.
Councilmember Glapion.
Present.
We have 3 members and a quorum.
Thank you. If I could get a motion to approve the minutes from the January 12th meeting.
So moved.
Councilmember, let's read through the agenda and get through that for public comment first before we take that up.
All right. Okay.
The agenda for the March 1st Criminal Justice Committee meeting is as follows. 1, roll call. 2, approval of the minutes from the December 15th, 2020 meeting. 3, calendar ordinance number 33,234 by Councilmembers Banks and Nguyen. An ordinance to amend and reordain section 54-414 of Article 6, Chapter 54 of the Code of the City of New Orleans to revise the curfew laws for minors and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Presenter, Superintendent Sean Ferguson, New Orleans Police Department. 4, presentation on electronic monitoring. Presenters, Commissioner Tanisha Stevens, Office of Criminal Justice Coordination. Nathaniel Weaver, Office of Criminal Justice Coordination. 5, presentation on the impacts of early childhood education. Presenters, Libby Saunier, Executive Director, Louisiana Policy Institute for Children. Hamilton Simmons Jones, Founder and Principal, Resourceful Consulting. 6, adjournment.
Thank you. If we can now have the motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. Now we will stand down for 10 minutes for the public comment. And what time does that bring us back?
We'll be back at 10:13 a.m.
Thank you, sir. So we stand down for public comment until 10:13 a.m. Thank you. Good morning again. We have had the required recess to allow for public comment, and we're about to get started in the agenda. But before we go to Chief Ferguson for the first item, I just wanted to publicly express my sympathy to the Mitchum family. Martinius Mitchum was the officer who was slaughtered at the high school basketball game over the weekend. And I am just numb over all of these killings, and it's not just his, it's all of these killings that are taking place. So I'm hoping that these efforts that we're putting forth can somehow bring an end to this senselessness, because it is way past ridiculous. And my sympathy to all of the victims, but specifically the Officer Mitchum's family. I just wanted to say thank you, because he died a hero, and there is no telling what would have happened or how many lives he possibly saved if that individual had gotten into the gym with the apparent intentions that he looked like he had. So with that, again, my sympathies to all of those families. Chief, if you would proceed with the first order of business, which is an ordinance relative to revising the curfew laws for minors. Chief Ferguson.
Good morning, Council. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak before you. Also, thank you for your expressions of condolences to the Mitchum family. Very horrible situation, but this too we will get through together. We are here today. I'm here on behalf of New Orleans Police Department expressing support and making a request to formally amend our city's curfew ordinance to include 17-year-olds as juveniles. As we know, last year, July 1st, 2020, the state recognized 17-year-olds as juveniles. And we're just asking that our city ordinance reflect the same in a manner in which when we are engaging our youth, we're dealing with them as just that, as juveniles and not as adults. And our office is not put in a vicarious situation as such. This is not an attempt by our department in no way, shape, or form to arrest juveniles for being out after hours. It is actually the opposite. This is about ensuring their safety, ensuring that they're able to be placed in a safe environment after hours. Of course, unless our kids are on their way home from a job or work event or school event, of course, we would not take action. But I just can't think of a reason why our juveniles would be out at 2 a.m. in the morning. Just last month, we recently arrested two 17-year-olds in possession of a firearm, both of which were armed with a stolen firearm at 4 a.m. in the morning. We're just trying to we're doing our due diligence and trying to ensure safety throughout our city, and more specifically with our juveniles. And one of these juveniles actually was just a victim of a shooting last week as well. One of those same juveniles who was in possession of that firearm. So we're just trying to do our due diligence and ensuring the safety of everyone. It is our hope, and I just want to explain what our current situation is with regards to curfew violators. Given the COVID restrictions and guidelines that we're dealing with right now, we do not actually have a curfew center. So if a juvenile is located or found to be in violation of this ordinance, we will bring that juvenile home. And this is no different than what we were doing pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, if we found a juvenile to be in violation of the curfew ordinance, we return that juvenile home where they were released to their parent or legal guardian. That was on the first violation as well as the second violation. It is only on the third violation we actually were bringing them, if need be necessary, to the curfew center. And that was in an effort to tie that family into resources. Because apparently if this child is out on a third time, violating this ordinance for a third occasion, there must be some sort of issue within that household. And we were doing our due diligence in an attempt to tie that family into resources that could hopefully help them to be productive. So again, right now, we do not formally have a curfew center. We're bringing the kids home. We're just asking that this ordinance be amended to reflect the same so that we can treat our children as just that, as children. And this is all in the interest of public safety and safety for our juveniles. So again, I'm here to answer any questions that you may have, but we're just asking that this amendment be put in place so that we can better serve our youth of New Orleans.
Chief, let me ask you the first question. This is tracking what is currently state law, correct?
Yes, sir. This is exactly what this is doing. July 1st of 2020, state law recognizes and mandated that 17-year-olds are recognized as juveniles.
Okay. All right. Colleagues, any questions? Paul, would you also note that Councilmember Palmer has joined us? I see the council president is also here. So colleagues, any questions?
Thank you, Jay.
Okay, public comment, please.
We have one comment on this item from Val Cupid. What good are laws if we have no enforcement of those laws? No consequences. If you do away with incarceration, so what is the plan? The upside down enforcement has deadly consequences, as you have seen this past year. Police pick up, then what? 60-bed facility is a joke for these underage criminals. Need to open the size of Old Charity and give all funding to our elected criminal sheriff for him to find the proper programs. What
All
about
your audio is going off and on. So can you, I'm not sure if the public heard it, but I know it didn't come through in here. Can you try that again?
I can read the public comment if y'all would like for the item number 1. All right. What good, am I on?
We can hear you, Jenna.
I'm sorry, was I on? Did you hear me? Okay. I was starting to read it. It's, oh, the whole thing reset?
Everything went down?
It seems like what it looked like now. All these dashes.
Okay, folks, I think we're back. Technology is great when it works and it kind of sucks when it doesn't. So Jenna, would you try the public comment? Would you read the public comment?
Yes, sir, boss. I have a public comment right here. All right, there's one public comment for this item from Val Cupid, not a paid representative. What good are laws if we have no enforcement of those laws, no consequences? You say do away with incarceration. So what is the plan? The upside down enforcement has deadly consequences, as you have seen this past year. Police pick up, then what? 60-bed facility is a joke for these underage criminals. Need to open the size of Old Charity and give all the funding to our elected criminal sheriff for him to find the proper programs. What about the victims? Who represents them? If all is wanting to help rehab the criminals, why not give all this new funding to CSO? Who represents the law-abiding citizens in New Orleans? Let's say everyone converts to being good and you have 200 underage that refuse. Just let them go and victimize the people, the very people that you've just rehabbed. The neighborhood churches in the community have for years made good headway. Now, poof, just like that, you take away all their support with catch and release. Our elected officials, if you are listening to all of these out-of-towners with their fancy unwritten plans telling you that they know better, great. Have them show the exact plan printed out on the front page of the paper for all to see. If you cannot, then get out of our way and X out all of this bull so that we, the community, can get back to work on saving our kids, community, our city. Our plan, take those off the street that wish to break the law and bully the beautiful children we are trying to raise. Yes, lock them away from the good kids, then try to rehab those that are there. Separate the drug/mental from wayward juveniles, then proceed. Show us your plan first. Give our criminal sheriff all that he needs to start his boot camp/rehab, whatever. This would be the proper venue. Are you saying you do not trust our elected criminal sheriff? Once again, what about the victims? Val Cupid, NOLA. And that's the end of public comment for this item.
Thank you, ma'am. So with that, I move for adoption of the ordinance. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, moved in second. Any questions, colleagues? All right, can we get a roll call, please? Or better, I'm not sure if Paul is back up. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you all. That moves on to the council's agenda. Next on the agenda is a presentation relative to electronic monitoring. Commissioner Tanisha Stevens and Nathaniel Weaver of the Criminal Justice Coordination are going to be the presenters. This is an extension of the conversation that we had at last month's meeting when we were asking for where holes in the bucket were. And one of the things that was glaringly clear that there was an interest in having an effective electronic monitoring program, but the devil is always in the details. So with that, we wanted to explore that further to see how we could have an effective program to actually get us to having some positive results with the reduction of this plague of crime. So with that, Dr. Stevens, Commissioner Stevens rather, get your promotion, please.
Good morning, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this morning. I have with me Nathaniel Weaver and Asher Reisman, who's also on. We've put together a PowerPoint, and Nathaniel will go through the PowerPoint. I just had a few introduction remarks this morning. Today, we will present research and best practices as it relates to the electronic monitoring as collected by my office and the staff of OCJC. While the criminal justice practitioners have employed various forms of the electronic monitoring for several decades, it is in some way a developing and ever-changing technology, which means that it has to change with technology so that we can have the best and the brightest on the market. If the council and our criminal justice partners decide to pursue the electronic monitoring program, which I believe we're all on board, it will be essential to form policies that are endorsed by the relevant parties, appropriately targeted and informed by best practices. So our partners that will be needed for the electronic monitoring to be very successful will be that of one, your New Orleans Police Superintendent Sean Ferguson, your criminal sheriff, Sheriff Marlon Gusman, juvenile court judges, Chief Judge Candace Bates Anderson, and also Chief Judge Karen Herman. We all have been in communication, constant communication, and it's no secret to electronic monitoring. It has been ran before through juvenile court, along with NOPD and the sheriff's office. So everybody that is involved in a process understands and know what our hiccups would be, and to avoid that, we will actually do everything in our powers to have the best policies and procedures put in place. Should the council opt to pursue a new electronic monitoring program, of course, my Office of Criminal Justice Coordination, stands ready to support that effort. We have familiarized ourselves with research, literature, and people and organizations that have done the work and are currently using the product. To include our partners in the Safety and Justice Challenge Network, as well as the National Criminal Justice Technology Research, Testing, and Evaluation Center at Johns Hopkins, who we reached out as early as last week. Our goal today is to outline the potential contours of the electronic monitoring program in Orleans Parish, inform you about the past experience in New Orleans and experiences other jurisdictions are experiencing. We will outline several questions that must be answered early on in order for us to have a very effective and efficient electronic monitoring program. So at this time, I will turn it over to Nathaniel, and he's going to walk us through the PowerPoint.
Are you muted?
I am going to mute.
Tanisha, just in case the PowerPoint is not up, so I'm not sure if that is related to these other technical issues we're having, but we cannot see the PowerPoint.
Share our screen.
Jay, must be the council because I could see it on my screen.
Yeah, I see it too.
It's
I
not
can
up.
see it as well.
Oh, Jay, it must just be you operating that technology over there.
Yeah, we've got ours as well.
Learn from you, Kristen. Thank you, my council wife. I took lessons from you. It's not up in the chamber, so no, if you guys got it, proceed with it, and we'll just get a hard copy of it. So go ahead.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Banks, I also have the TV on and it is not up on the access channel. It is showing up on my screen, but not on the TV screen. So the public may not be seeing it.
Okay, all righty. We'll just have to get a hard copy and then make it available on the website. So, Tanisha, you guys proceed.
Okay, thank you. So, oh, sure. Are you muted? Okay, I'm sorry. I think we're. Are you sure? I apologize. I think we're picking up echoes from multiple speakers. So my name is Nathaniel Weaver. I'm a project manager with the Office of Criminal Justice Coordination. I work for Commissioner Tanisha Stevens. Today, we wanted to summarize some of the research that our office has done over the past year, looking at different options for implementing electronic monitoring in Orleans Parish, drawing on the lessons that we learned from previous implementations, as well as the experiences of other jurisdictions. Next slide, please. Okay, so today, just to quickly highlight what we'll talk about the purpose of the program, potential goals for the program, a summary of key elements that we think will be important, a little bit about the historical context and findings from other jurisdictions, a few notes on the current standards and the technology of electronic monitoring, some thoughts about articulating program goals, some of the potential pitfalls we want to avoid, and then recommendations going forward. Next slide, please. So Commissioner Stevens already talked about the overarching purpose today. Really, we want to summarize lessons learned from the past. We want to outline potential goals for the future, and we want to articulate key program design decisions requiring consensus prior to implementation. Next slide, please. Okay, so from talking to our partners at the Justice Management Institute, as well as other jurisdictions that have implemented electronic monitoring, some of the elements that they really emphasized are that we need to be very specific about our goals at the outset. So that would include whether the goal is to deter future crime, to allow people out of jail who otherwise might be in jail, to provide new evidence to the police department, or just to report back to the court if there are violations of monitoring conditions, which is in itself a legitimate goal. So we want to narrowly define the target population. A lot of jurisdictions have seen creep where people who originally were not envisioned as being part of the program have been enrolled in electronic monitoring by the courts, which leads to an inflation of the numbers. So for instance, in Harris County, they have over 3,000 individuals on monitoring, some of whom have been monitored for years, and it costs upwards of $250,000 a month. So we want to narrowly define our target population in partnership with the courts, restrict overuse, cap enrollment and duration, determine whether our goal here is active or passive monitoring. Most local jurisdictions actually use this as passive monitoring. So there's not a notification that's sent to law enforcement when a violation occurs. It's reported after the fact. It doesn't have to be that way here. That's just a note that that's the way it has been implemented in some other jurisdictions. We need to determine the requirements on law enforcement personnel so we don't divert resources from other public safety uses. And we need to clarify the system of sanctions. So if there is a violation, are we prepared to enforce sanctions and to consider with the courts what appropriate sanctions are for those violations? Next slide, please. All right, so very quick background on the implementation of electronic monitoring in Orleans Parish. So from roughly 2004 to 2010, electronic monitoring was available in both criminal court and juvenile court. It was mostly managed by a local private company, Total Sentencing Alternative Program, TSAP. Beginning around 2010, the city put out an RFP and transition management to the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office, who managed it until 2016 in both criminal court and juvenile court. The sheriff had announced in late 2015 that they no longer wanted to be involved in the program. The city put out a new RFP in 2016, determined that neither of the bidders met the minimum requirements, and so ceased focusing on adult court and shifted to focusing on Orleans Parish Juvenile Court, where the program operated from 2017 to 2018, with staff of juvenile court providing the first response when a violation was reported, and then contacting police as necessary. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to touch briefly on the national research, and a lot of the credit for this research goes to Asher Reisman in our office, who did a thorough literature review. I think the key takeaway here is that the findings have been very mixed. So there's pretty strong evidence that it's effective post-sentencing in lieu of prison sentences to deter recidivism. There are a lot fewer studies of using it pre-sentencing. In the most recent review, which was a systematic review of the effectiveness of electronic monitoring in the Journal of Criminal Justice from May 2020, they only found a few studies that they were able to include that were pre-sentencing, that met their standards for scientific rigor. And in those, they weren't able to find a positive effect. There was actually a negative effect in the case of domestic abuse cases. None of which is to say that the program can't be effective. It's just to set expectations so that we know this isn't going to be
Nathaniel, I have a quick question.
And make a difference. But it's not the end all and be all. Next slide,
Mr.
please.
Chairman, I have a quick question on this slide. Hey,
Please.
Nathaniel, I have a quick question.
Ma'am, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, so on these studies,
What?
can you hear me, Nathaniel? Can you hear me?
We may have put a duplicate slide in there. So the one that we're looking for
Wait.
is
All right.
Nathaniel, can you hear me?
Data agency energy.
And I don't think he can hear you
I don't think so.
here this morning.
I can hear you, so I don't know if it's just on Nathaniel's end. Is there a chat function?
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and speak about the next slide.
Well, wait a minute, Nathaniel.
I
Council
mean, I can see if I can.
question, can you hear her?
Can you hear me, Nathaniel?
You turn up your volume.
I think they're trying to turn up the volume.
I cannot.
You can't hear. Okay. I'm sorry to.
Having difficulties over here.
Is that better, Nathaniel?
Can you all hear us?
I can hear you, Tanisha. Nathaniel, can you hear me?
I can. Apologies about that.
Perfect. Okay, my question is on this particular slide on the studies that talked about pre-sentencing electronic monitoring. Was that type of electronic monitoring the instant type of monitoring that notifies immediately when there's a violation, or is it the following day type of notification after the violation has occurred?
You know, I'm not sure if that was specified in the study. Asher, do you recall seeing that in the review? I'm sorry.
I don't think it was.
So off the top of my head, I do not know, but we can look into it.
Okay, I'd just be interested to see, because I would think that, you know, if it's, well, I can go into that piece later on just the, you know, notification of immediate violation versus notification after a violation had occurred a day or two later. We'll get into that later, but I just wanted to ask about the studies, but I'll let you continue, Nathaniel. Sorry for interrupting. I didn't realize it was going to lead to all of this technological things. So
it's good that I'm able to hear you guys now.
Good.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's a good point and something that we should find out and look into further. Okay, so from speaking to other agencies that have implemented electronic monitoring, in particular, the project lead who implemented it in the Sheriff's Office in Mecklenburg County in Charlotte, North Carolina, as well as the person who led it in the Washington, D.C. pretrial services program and Harris County, who currently leads it in Harris County. They really emphasize it's best used as a means of enforcing other conditions. So if a person is supposed to be home during certain hours or has other conditions, it's a way to provide visibility on whether or not they're complying with those conditions. They both stress that independent oversight is very important, that once this tool is made available, regardless of what the guidelines are for who should be enrolled in electronic monitoring, it can be overused by some judges. And so there needs to be some way to verify that people are meeting the criteria we set.
Chairman Banks, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Palmer.
What is the definition of independent oversight?
So by this, it would mean external to the courts, so that if it could be the Office of Criminal Justice Coordination, it could be the mayor's office, the CEO's office, but some entity outside of the court system that would be reviewing to make sure that people enrolled in the program comply with the requirements that we said at the beginning. I think one of the reasons for that is agencies outside of the courts are going to have more of a financial incentive to make sure that it's only used in those cases where it's seen to be best, whereas courts might err on the side of using it in as many cases as possible, since they're not going to be responsible for payment of the program. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. So then set limits on the duration of enrollment. In Harris County, they said that they have some people who have been on for years. They've recently switched to limiting it to 60 days. They actually recommended limiting participation to 30 days, because if there's going to be a violation of the terms of release, typically those happen early in the process. And so by having somebody on for 30 days, we could identify those instances.
And that was one of the reasons, one of the issues we had identified in 2018 with the current EMP that was in place, was that we had individuals that were on electronic monitoring for longer than normal. Like, it is not a program where you can have a person on there for 120 days. That is not this type of program, and it should not be used in that light. So when we talk about having policies and protocols put in place and procedures, that is part of why they need to be put in place. And it's very important that we have the buy-in from the judges so that they can also understand the conditions of the program when they are actually placing a person on electronic monitoring. And what Nathaniel did not mention was that Harris County, right now, they have over 3,000 people on electronic monitoring. So go figure that. That is a huge amount of people to be on electronic monitoring, but of course it's a bigger county. We're not looking to do that number. When we get to that part of hashing out the contract and what that looks like, we will determine a number based on the juvenile and also from criminal district court. So just keep that in mind.
Let me interject. When you just said that in order for this thing to be effective, you have to have buy-in from the judges. Have the judges been resistant to doing this, or this has not been presented in this format?
No, I don't think I've spoken to Judge Bates Anderson, who actually was part of the EMP process back in 2018 before I came to this post. So she can speak to how juvenile court ran it or give some insight, but it was just the company that they had that actually had the RP from the city was not the best utilized company. They had some flaws and they had some faults. They didn't have monitors that work properly. You're supposed to, I think it was 30 monitors out of 30, you may have had 10. Sometimes the judges use the override system where if a kid violated or if a young person violated, they'll just put them back on a monitor. So it was like the police was making the arrest on a violation or was getting the violation notice, but yet and still was not being able to bring the kid in because it was override before they were able to get to the kid. So it's just very important that moving forward, when we do get the program up and running, that we need to stick to the proper protocols that are in place.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, not a criminologist. It's a basic question. We know it did not work before.
Right.
So,
but that was in part of the company that was housing the, that was actually Sentinel was the company that provided the electronic monitoring, the ankle bracelets. The company we're looking at now is BI. They have a state contract. They run Jefferson Parish Juvenile and Jefferson Parish Criminal. They also run East Baton Rouge and St. Tammany. They have up-to-date technology. They have a cell phone usage, and they also have the new slim ankle monitor bracelet. So I have a presentation they sent over. I'm going to forward it to all of the council members for them to review. And also I don't know if I sent it to Judge Herman and Judge Anderson just yet, but that is the company that we're kind of looking at because we don't have to go through the entire RP process because they already have it's a state contractor. So with the technology based on 5 years ago, we're in a much better situation is what I'm saying. And I think the judges will be eager to look at the protocols that we've started making and the policies that we have put in place. And also we will need them to have some input in the policies on the legal side of it.
Chairman?
We know where the wheels came off on the technical side. And we're making every effort to make sure that we don't go down that path again.
Correct.
As it relates to the implementation side, do all of the parties that have to play a role in this, have they all consented? Now, we had the meeting last month and it sounded like there was much support for this, but the devil's always in the details. We need to make sure that all of the players that have a role to play are going to play the role that they have to play to make this thing work. So have we gotten those kind of discussions underway to make sure that everybody who has to be involved is going to have buy-in and be involved? Has that stuff started, or is that where we need to be going? I need to know who is it that we need to bring to the table to make sure.
Judge Bates is on. I think she can kind of, we've had conversations. I have not. We just have to figure out what involvement the police and the sheriff is going to play. One, that's going to be picking up the violators, but also what the policy and process will be for juveniles from juvenile court. So that's going to be the part where Judge Anderson comes in and share what her protocols will be in place. And because she's the chief judge, she can enforce what our policy should be and what it's going to be. And that is not to deviate once a person is violated, not to override the violation in a sense where you're putting the person back on electronic monitoring.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. To add what the commissioner said, I would say at this point, what we're seeing is broad agreement that this could be a useful tool and the agencies want to participate. There are some additional details that we'll need to hammer out. I think the two most critical ones are going to be stipulations by the court for participation, as well as anticipated sanctions for violations. So, one of the questions that we had when we looked at this for juvenile court before is if you have a case where a juvenile has a technical violation of their monitoring conditions, but they haven't committed a new crime, what sanctions will be in place for that individual? Is the expectation that the police would then make an arrest, or that the person would go into custody for the technical violation? And we don't have the answer to that. That's one of the details that needs to be worked out in order to understand the level of police involvement and to ensure that the program is designed effectively.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, how are we going to fund this?
Well, it has been funded before through the general fund. When I came on in 2018, it was funded through the general fund, and it was the oversight was from the Office of Criminal Justice Coordination, so it was put into my budget.
So what are we looking at in reference to the budget? To funding this? Do you guys have a price tag?
Today from BI, he's going to, Matt is our person of contact. He's going to send over that information because, as I stated earlier, the technology from 2018 has changed. So we're looking at other things that are very convenient, and especially with the GPS cell phone and the slim ankle monitor. So we need to have those conversations with our stakeholders who's going to be involved in this to figure out, one, how many monitors we're going to need, and what is that number we can agree on and get prices as it relates to the number of devices we're going to utilize. So once I get that, I can actually give you a price, but according to what we have received in 2018, look like from 2016 to 2017, I think it was somewhere around 80,000. I'm not sure if that number is an accurate number. We could not find the CEA agreement to see what the funding was that was in the budget for that particular year. So once I get that, I will send it over to all of the council members. And we're also, of course, we're looking for funding as it relates to EMP. The state had some funding that was available through the Office of Juvenile Justice on last year. So I have reached out to them to see if that funding will be available again this year. And I'm waiting for a response by email from them regarding that. So we are aggressively looking for grant funding to cover some of the costs of the EMP. But if we want to make it part of what we're doing, then I would suggest that we it needs to come from the general fund right now, but understanding our economic state, we're aggressively looking for grant funds to cover this.
Got it. So, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I mean, I would love for Commissioner Stevens to come back to the Criminal Justice Committee to basically present once they get there, so that way we can understand the policies that's going to be set around the electronic monitoring system. Because it sounds like there's a lot of connections and connecting with groups and finalizing the details that still needs to be done as well.
Yes, ma'am, that is the plan. If this was easy to do, it likely would have already been done. So we've got a bunch of pieces together. So I wish I could tell you that we can have this done tomorrow, but that's not realistic. So this is obviously not going to be the final meeting. All of these different components have to work together. So we still got work to do. The plus that for us now is that we're doing it, and it had not been happening. And as a result of that meeting that we had last month, where they told us what we need to focus on, that's why we're here. So this is the direction we're going in, but it is truly not final yet. So there would definitely be more discussion, because all of those details as opposed to how to pay for it, as opposed to the council president's question, whether it's going to be real time or whether it's going to be a day delay, all of those things have to be worked out. We don't want to move forward with something just to say that we did something. It's not about, having a press conference or slapping ourselves on the back. This is about getting something in place that is actually workable, that is going to make a difference to help keep our citizens safe. So it's definitely not going to be finished today, but we will continue these discussions, absolutely.
And I'd like to add, Councilmember Banks, also that some of the legwork has been done because we've started working on this since last year. when we were looking into the use of bringing back EMP. So we're just kind of wrapping up. We pretty much have preliminary policies and procedures that we got together and put in place. We will share that with Chief Judge Anderson and also Judge Herman for their suggestions and recommendation as to what we have put together. So it won't be that we're starting from scratch or reinventing the wheel. We all already have some policies and procedures already together. What is going to be new is the company that we're looking at, and it's going to be an easier process because they're already, the city of New Orleans is already part of their contract in some form or fashion. So I think if we work tirelessly within the next couple of weeks and focus on just the EMP, I think by July we can have something in place, depending on funding as well and where the money will come from. So we're going to do everything in our powers here at OCJC to make sure that we're providing you all with the best information and accurate information and what is going to work. As you stated, Councilmember Banks, we do not want to just say, oh, we have a program and we have EMP and it's not worth the hill of beans. So I am one who wants to make sure that everything is on up and up and that we're doing it the correct way so that we can have the best results for our parish.
So, I think we've covered most of the other things that I was going to touch on in the PowerPoint itself. But we could skip to the last slide if you'd like on recommendations.
Wait, I still have a question, Councilmember Banks.
Please, Councilmember Palmer.
Thank you so much. Tanisha, my question is, I know you said that that the policy is for 30 days on the program. My question is that part, do not the judges also have a say in how long somebody's on the program? I guess is my question.
Well, they actually can, we can talk about it, but it should not be any, I agreed to 45 days. So that is something that needs to be agreed upon with our judges as well, because the program is not a life program. It's not, a person can be on electronic monitoring forever. So we're going to have to decide as a team, what is that number between 30 and 45? Generally, you can do 30, between 30 and 60 is what most agencies use in our metropolitan area that utilizes electronic monitoring.
Okay, so it has to be a consensus.
Correct.
In terms of who makes those policies.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so if we could skip to section 8, the last slide, recommendations. So this goes to what we were just discussing, and I think we're not heading into this without some idea of the direction that we would go on these decisions, but we just wanted to make sure that they're outlined for the council, that these are the things that must be decided, that between the police department, the sheriff's office, the courts, Office of Criminal Justice Coordination, and other stakeholders, that we all are in agreement on the program goals. So whether this is to deter new crime, to help investigate existing crime, or to increase compliance with court conditions. Active versus inactive monitoring. So whether this is going to be a notification that comes after the fact or something that comes live to law enforcement. Obviously, there's, in terms of public safety, I think all of us would like to see active notifications when there is a violation. The question that we'll have to address then is what sorts of police resources we have to dedicate to this. Fewer than 1 out of 100 violations when we had this in juvenile court resulted in an arrest. I think fewer than 1 out of 50 resulted in police being dispatched. So if we want active monitoring, we're going to decide who has to make the determination on whether the violation is real or not. We need to identify the target population, as we just discussed, maximum enrollment and duration, both for budgetary considerations as well as for what's most effective for participants in the courts. Discussion of law enforcement responsibilities. Is there going to be a dedicated unit to respond to this, as there was when it was at the sheriff's office, and the police department dedicated some manpower to that unit? Or is the expectation that if there's a violation, whoever the patrol officer is on, nearest will respond to that? There are pros and cons to both. and then the framework for sanctions and enforcement. So, if the intent of this is to be a deterrent, the worst possible scenario is that we say that there will be sanctions for violations, and then they're not enforced, leading individuals on monitoring to think that they're able to violate without consequence. So those are the key considerations that we're discussing, as the commissioner said, with the agencies. We thought it was important to outline those for the public and for the council, to have a public discussion of the nature of the program going forward.
Is that the conclusion?
Yes.
Colleagues, any other questions?
I have a quick question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. Nathaniel or Asher, whoever can take this. Are you all doing a cost analysis on the immediate notification system versus a notification system or a provider that's going to tell us 2 days after an event has happened, and so we can compare those two?
So actually, and I should have clarified this when we discussed active versus passive. In either case, the technology will tell us right away when there is a violation. The question, I guess, is what the local response is. So if we have somebody dedicated 24/7 to monitoring this locally, that might dictate what the response is. But in either case, the technology that we'll purchase will provide the ability to know in real time if there's a violation, and we don't anticipate a difference in the cost by the vendor for that capability.
Gotcha. So the cost is on the local monitoring piece, right?
Yes.
And who can do, and sorry, Ms. Stevens, if you want to chime in, or you can answer this question, and who's going to do that cost analysis so we can see budget wise what that looks like, the actual monitoring piece real time versus someone just coming in the next day and seeing who violated what?
So we're actually working with the company BI, and actually we thought it would be best to do the third party monitoring. So that way we're not utilizing or taking the police or the sheriff or whomever from their responsibility. They will only be used to pick up the violator once that violation has been vetted. Because just because a person has violated, we still need to make sure it is a 100% violation, because it may go off if I'm going right outside and I'm not in the zone that I'm supposed to be, the inclusionary zone that I'm supposed to be in. It may go off, which means that you will get a false violation notice that, hey, I'm not in the area that I'm supposed to be, and I'm only like a few feet from that zone. So we're actually working with them to get a breakdown of everything. We have line items that we want to get cost analysis on versus whatever. We're actually trying to follow what Jefferson Parish has in place. I've been talking to Roy Junker for about the last year with this. We recently talked last year. I went over there just to see how their program is set up and have a good idea on where we're going and what's going to work for our juvenile system. Have not had much conversation with criminal district court as of yet, because I think some courtrooms are using private companies, I believe. So we're trying to figure a way to bring everybody on to one system, and not different courts are using it and some courts are not. So that is a conversation Judge Herman and I are going to have real soon.
And I'm certainly no expert at all in this technology. I know very little of how it works. So I'm really sorry if I'm asking questions that you're like, oh, Helena, that's obvious or not obvious. But my question is, doesn't the technology show you whether it's a real violation or not? Can you not see on GPS that it's like, oh, wait, this person is still like in the radius of their house, or gosh, this person is 10 miles away from where they need to be, just so that there could be some type of real-time response?
Right. The technology that we're looking at is in real time, but we still need to have it vetted for legal reasons. And for if the person is out awaiting trial, we still need to make sure that we're vetting that violation just for the proper protocol and the process that they could be placed at a scene of a crime, right? Or NOPD or the sheriff's office may be doing some sort of investigation where, hey, they got a towel that showed, Jane Doe was close by when this murder occurred or when this armed robbery occurred. So we just need to make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's just to be on the safe side, and vetting the violation is the most effective that we need if it comes up in another legal case or something along those lines. But vetting, of course, all the technology is real time. It actually happens right then and there. If you're, taking your monitor off, you're going to get that beep. If you're going to cut it off, you're going to get everything in real time. So we did a little presentation by Zoom with the BI company last week, and it was impressive how technology has changed within the last 5 to 6 years on the electronic monitoring piece.
I mean, the reason why I say about the real-time response, and like I said, I don't understand this technology fully, but is that, for example, if you have a case, let's say some type of armed robbery or something like that, or even an armed robbery into a home. So, you've got a perpetrator who has been arrested. He's let out under supervision with an ankle monitor. I guess my question would be that if it shows that this particular person, let's say, is going back to the location of where maybe this armed robbery happened to potentially harm someone or whatever, that it could be responded to in real time. I would just hate for someone to get injured, hurt, another victim of a crime, some type of retaliation to happen, if there's a way to be able to stop this in real time. And I think that's really kind of what the public is looking for. When they talk about supervision, it's one thing, of course, to pop someone a couple of days later that, hey, you went and did something bad, but I think they're looking more for a type of crime prevention initiative to be able to stop those potential offenders from reoffending should it seem like they could be doing something that they're not supposed to.
And you're right. And that's exactly what happened with a company that was utilized back in 2017, Sentinel, because it wasn't in real time. If it was in real time, the violation wasn't being reported until a day or 2 days later, which defeats the purpose pretty much. So that's why it was my decision back then to do away with it, because it was a waste of the taxpayers' money. The program was not effective based on the response that Sentinel had been giving and providing. The services that they were providing to juvenile court was not conducive to what our needs were. So with that being said, that's why we're looking at BI, and it's a real time, putting you right there. Violation notification is instant, so it's not 2 days later. So yeah, we're on the same page.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens.
And I do see Judge Bates is on. I'm not sure if she has anything to add or would like to say a few things, because the program was under juvenile court, the last program, that ended in 2018, May of 2018.
Hi, this is Brianna Rock. I'm the program director at the Orleans Parish Juvenile Court. So Judge Bates is on, but she's also in a hearing simultaneously. So I am going to speak for her. We're definitely in agreement with working on the EMP and working with Commissioner Stevens to ensure that this program is well thought out and can be successful for Orleans Parish. So we're definitely on board and plan to have future conversations with the commissioner and the other parties involved to make sure that this program is successful. Thank you.
Tanisha, let me go back to the track that the council president was on. Help me understand what happens in Jefferson Parish and in the other places that are using real time. Joe Blow leaves his designated area and goes somewhere he's not supposed to be 10 miles away. The bell goes off or the thing buzzes or whatever it does. Exactly what happens at that point?
They're notified by their company, by BI, that a violation has occurred. And then the sheriff's office is notified, and then they actually go out to make sure that the violation, either pick up the violator, but they get it vetted through BI in real time, and they send it to the sheriff's office. So we're a little different. Of course, Orleans Parish is unique in itself. We have a police department and a sheriff. So everything in Jefferson Parish is regulated and generated through the sheriff. So they get a notification of a violator. It is then sent to the sheriff's office, whoever is monitoring their electronic monitoring program, and then they dispatch the proper staffing to handle the violators. So generally the person is picked up and brought back in and then taken off of the electronic monitoring and go before a judge.
So that's where I was going. If Joe Blow violates electronic monitoring and is picked up for being someplace he is not supposed to be, he doesn't go back on the electronic monitoring. He goes to a higher level of incarceration or whatever you call it at that point. Is that what happens?
That is correct, but of course that is the discretion of the judge. The judge will make that determination.
And Judge Anderson, how you doing, Councilor? Thanks.
And
Judge Anderson is on. She was.
How? I mean, this is at 10 o'clock, the bell goes off and he is in the lower ninth ward. He was supposed to be in Gertown, and now he's in the lower ninth ward. So at 10 o'clock, the bell goes, and now what happens? When do they pick him up and when does he get brought back?
Okay, so I'm not sure if that question was directed to me or to Commissioner Stevens. How you doing, Councilmember Banks?
Judge, no, I was directing that to Commissioner Stevens. I'm just trying to get
right. I know. I think we're all trying to get a picture, but I think what we've realized in the past, and I know with Commissioner Stevens and Nathaniel's on the line, we've been having this conversation, I'd say probably for at least the last 2 or 3 years. And I think part of the probably problems with the electronic monitoring before was just every judge, and I'm sure probably Judge Herman can kind of attest to this, we were all sort of working in silos. We're all kind of doing our own thing. And that's our takeaway from the hope of getting this electronic monitoring program back, is that we are willing to all work together where we're going to follow pretty much the same set of guidelines, the same set of policies and procedures. And so I know that's something that Commissioner Stevens is already working on with some input from the judges. So that way, whatever it is that we decide on, that's what it's going to look like. So if the policy and procedure says that if it's a violation and that child has to be picked up, then we're going to consider it a violation. I'll agree that like many of us, we may get a call, child is violating, and we find out, well, they were really going over to grandma's house for whatever. But again, I think that we've realized that if we want this to work, we've got to have some strict guidelines that we're going to abide by. And I think that you all can be confident that prior to everything being submitted, that will be something that at least the judges on the juvenile bench have all agreed to abide by the same rules and requirements, so we can make sure we can have this program to be a success.
Okay. Colleagues, any other questions? Judge Herman, did you have anything?
Thank you, I have one quick question, Councilmember Banks.
Wait, I'm sorry. Somebody asking a question?
I have.
Okay, Karen, I see you're waving. You're good, right? Okay, Karen's fine. Was someone else trying to speak? Okay, if we have no further questions, Tanisha, will you all finish the presentation?
Yes, sir, we're done.
All righty, thank you. So with that, we have no further questions. I know we had public comment. Jenna, if you would, please. We're not having the best technologically astute day today, guys. Cannot hear it.
Are y'all able to hear me now?
Okay,
Yes.
Jim, go ahead.
Okay. All right, the one public comment is from Val Cupid, not a paid representative. This is a tool. Ask the family of the arrested if this is really what they consider the best interest for that child. Many families are victimized by this arrested family member. They're also trying to raise other children and would like to see this bad influence go away, then come back rehabbed. If they themselves are not of the above mentality, do you really think that arrested stands a chance back at home? This is the problem. Some arrested juveniles have more sense than their guardian. First offenders, this tool may work, but not repeat offenders. Most of the time, have to remove arrested out of their toxic environment to get anywhere with a charge around. If they violate the Fitbit home/school order, what are those consequences? Has this violation created more victims? What is cheaper? What about the victims? Val Cupid, NOLA. And that's the end of public comment for that item.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. With that, we will move on with the agenda. The next item is a presentation on the impacts of early childhood education. The presenters are Ms. Libby Saunier, the Executive Director, Louisiana Policy Institute for Children, Hamilton Simmons Jones, founder and principal of Resourceful Counseling. Now, and Julian Deloche Renee Reyes of the United Way. I ask that we have this discussion with early child education relative to criminal justice because it all dovetails together. And education is, I think, the critical component to addressing opportunities which makes the likelihood of crime far less. So every study that's ever been done shows that children who are prepared when they get to school do much better when they get there. And we are intentional in trying to move that ball down the field, because if we get our children prepared to learn, they will do much better, which will lessen the likelihood that they end up on a path of something that we don't want them to do. And I fervently believe that we will never arrest our way out of crime. We got to stop creating criminals. And one way to do that is get these kids educated so that they do have other options to be able to be successful in life. So with that, Dr. Saunier, if you would proceed.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Thank you, Councilman Banks. Again, my name is Dr. Libby Saunier. I'm the Executive Director of the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children. And thank you so much for having me today and my colleague Hamilton Simons Jones to really talk about why we should invest in New Orleans youngest learners at the end of the day. Next slide. Just a little context about the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that takes no public funds, so that when we stand up for children, we squarely stand up for children about advancing policies to ensure Louisiana's young children are ready for success in school and life, where we really envision a Louisiana in which all young children birth to age 4 are safe, healthy, and are able to reach their full potential. And our work at the Policy Institute seeks to be a source of nonpartisan, independent information on issues concerning children ages birth through 4 in Louisiana. Next slide. A little bit about why we do this work. I mean, obviously it's for children, and we're focusing on criminal justice and make sure that we can really make an impact of children when they're young, so that we don't have to worry about certain issues when they're older. But really, if we talk about the first 5 years of life, there's a business case. Next slide. And that business case is that currently in Louisiana, we know that 67% of children birth to age 4 have both or their single parent in the workforce, and 61% of infants have their mothers go back to work during their first year of life. And that childcare in Louisiana costs almost as much as public college tuition, which is important to note because it makes childcare not accessible for the very families that need support to get their children into quality early care and education. Next slide. And so we at the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children conducted a study back in 2017 that we're currently updating now, really trying to understand the gaps in reliable, affordable, quality care and education in our state when it faces our workforce in Louisiana. Next slide. And a quick overview is that it's, at the end of the day, childcare and access to quality early childcare and education is about children getting what they need, but it's also a 2-generation approach. So it's about children and their families. And so in our study, we really found that childcare issues have a great impact on the workforce participation of parents so that they can best care for their children. And so when families don't have access to quality early care and education, they turn down promotions, they're not able to go to work full time. Sometimes they're fired and sometimes they have to quit their job. Next slide. And women in the workforce really bear the brunt of not having access to quality early care and education. Again, we know what quality early care and education can do for young children, but what we also know is it can do for families, which I'll get to as we move forward in the presentation. Next slide. And really, this productivity issue is both for men and women that had to miss work regularly. So they were either, in the time of our study in that 3 months period, that parents are missing work around 41%. They were late to work because they didn't have access to quality early care and education, or they had to leave work early. Next slide. And so childcare issues cost employers in this state a great deal of money, about $816 million annually for employers that they lose, $1.1 billion in annual loss for the economy, and $84 million annual loss in tax revenue. This is important because we want to make sure families are back to work and that we have tax revenue to be able to pay for things like quality early care and education. Next slide. And it's really a business issue, so much so that the U.S. Chamber Foundation has laid out the work. It says, by laying out the crucial groundwork for tomorrow's workforce and promoting a strong workforce today, high quality childcare provides a powerful two-generation approach to building human capital that's a prosperous and sustainable that America requires. Next slide. And so what we know from scientists is that 80% of brain development happens between birth to age 3. Brains are built over time, and that early experiences affect the quality of the brain architecture. Children's brains are like the foundation of a house, and we all live in New Orleans. So we know a shoddy foundation in these older homes make these houses do all kinds of wonky things, and it's really expensive to get a house back shored up on a good foundation. That's the same thing for young children, and their brains are the foundation that we want to make sure that we build correctly by really providing high quality early care and education so that they're able to have productive lives as they grow older. And it's really expensive when we don't build that foundation correctly the first time. Next slide. And so here's what we know. Children learn and remember best when they are active in being able to influence and respond to the environment around them. A little bit about my background, just to put this in context. I've worked on one of the longest longitudinal studies in the country related to quality early care and education and the effects that happen to these children that received quality early care and education for their first 5 years of life and what happens to them into their midlife. So I'm going to get to talk to you about some of that work that really brings forward what Councilman Banks is saying is why we need to invest early so that we don't have poor outcomes later. Next slide. And so here's what we know. When we invest in young children, we have significant academic and social benefits throughout the life course. And what we know of, almost 55 years of research now is that when children have access, again, to quality early care and education that has robust vocabulary, reciprocal relationships where children and caregivers are going back and forth, and really rich learning environments with books and materials and wonderful things that children need to be able to learn, change, and grow. What we know is when they have those opportunities, their intelligence scores are higher, their reading and math skills are better, they have better academic locus of control. So it's their belief as a little person, as a student, that they have control over what they learn and that they're capable of what they learn, that they have social competencies. They attend college. And then if those who do attend college, they tend to finish college and earn a 4-year degree, have full-time employment, and have better cardiometabolic health. These are all things that are really, really important. And then on the flip side, the things that we see that are decreased when children have access to quality early care and education is this: reduced rates of grade repetition, reduced rates of special education placement, reduced rates of teenage pregnancy, of smoking and drug use, reduced rates of teen depression, reduced rates of needing public assistance, reduced rates of being overweight or having a high BMI, and then reduced rates of risk. Here's what we know. The trifecta of how children end up in a juvenile justice system is this: they tend to be retained in grades. Sometimes they end up in special education, and they have poor reading skills. And so when we invest in young children at the earliest ages, what we know, again, from longitudinal research is that they're able to read and have better math skills. They may not need to be retained by a grade, and they won't need special education services. As someone who's worked in the early care and education and early childhood world for close to 20 years, what we know is if a child ends up in special ed and has been retained by a grade, it is almost a sentence for them to end up in the juvenile system. And so we really, really, really need to make sure that we're investing in this early care and education during the first 5 years of life. All of this is wonderful for children, but there's an extra benefit to children when they have access to quality early care and education, is that their mamas and their caregivers, they end up having better educational attainment and better employment, which means that the overall household is able to care for these young people as a whole in a better way. Again, we've got 55 years of research. And so why is it taking us this long to make these types of investments that we know we need to make? I will also plug what you all have done as council members the last several years related to young children. You've made the investment of young children, of infants and toddlers in this city that is, quite frankly, one of its kind in the country, because you see that the investment over the long haul matters to children and to their families. Next slide. And so I know we're here today to talk about juvenile justice and criminal justice and all those types of things. And so really to put the return on investment, to contextualize that of when we invest in young children, what can happen. What we see through the Perry Preschool Project, which is another longitudinal study, which is the pinnacle, one of the pinnacle ones that really talks about criminal cost savings, is this. We see savings in education because we're not having to retain and they're not needing special education. We're seeing better taxes on earnings because people are making higher incomes and so they're able to pay taxes. We see welfare savings because we're not having, individuals are not having to access public assistance. And then when you see the crime savings for an individual that received high quality early care and education during those early years of life of over $170,000, that's a lot of money, especially when we're talking about a city and a parish where we know that we need to take any money that we have available and invest it in the smartest ways possible. And obviously we think, Councilman Banks thinks, and many of you on the council think, that investing in our youngest children is the right investment to make. Next slide. And so you'll see this too when we're talking about those significant academic and social benefits, is that for the program group, so the group that received that high quality early care and education, they were arrested less times by the age of 40. Again, every time somebody goes into the criminal justice system, it's costing taxpayers money. So anytime we can spend money on the front end versus the back end, we're gonna have a reduced cost at the end of the day. Next slide. And so the long-term benefits, what it suggests is that providing high quality early care and education to children born into multi-risk, economically impoverished families have lifelong benefits far beyond childhood. I will share this with you. I have an upcoming article about to come out looking at the structure and the functions of the brains 45 years later after economically disadvantaged children received high quality early care and education. We have seen the brains being different in structure and in function to a way that it's a marked difference, so that these individuals' lives are different and they're able to contribute to society in a meaningful way at the end of the day. Next slide. And so really, if we're going to talk about how we're spending our money, I don't know about you all, but I know about me. There's nowhere that I can put $1 anywhere in a bank, any investment, that I'm going to get 13% on return on investment. And so what we know from Jim Heckman, the Nobel laureate economist, is that for every dollar that we spend in high quality early care and education, like the programs that we have with the City Seats program in New Orleans, we can get up to a 13% return on investment. And this return on investment is actually seen as highly conservative. James Heckman now thinks we could go up to 18% return on investment for every dollar that we spend on high quality early care and education with wraparound social support services like we do in New Orleans with the City Seats program. Again, the investment is so important because what we're doing is we're investing in young children so that they don't end up in a criminal justice system later that's just waiting for them to fail. We want to set children up for success. We want them to go to school and be able to read, learn, and change and grow at the optimal level possible. And we know that we can do that. We have the science to support it when we invest in early care and education. Next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Hamilton Simons-Jones.
Thank you, Libby, and good morning, members of the council, and thank you, Councilmember Banks, for having us today. My name's Hamilton Simons-Jones, and I'm here on behalf of the New Orleans Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And we have been working for a number of years with a coalition of more than 120 nonprofits, business, and civic groups to ensure that every child in New Orleans reads on grade level by the end of third grade, because we know that is such an important predictor of which direction their life is going to go from there. And we also know, given what Dr. Saunier is saying about brain research, that that investment early on, particularly in those first 3 years, is critical. And, you know, we're honored to be here. We're honored to have the city and the council as a partner. As you all know very well, since 2018, you all have been investing directly in high quality early care and education for young children, particularly infants and toddlers. That started with an investment in 2018's budget of $750,000 that served 50 children. That has since been increased all the way up to $3 million in 2020. That program has now been leveraged with some additional federal funding. It's been leveraged with philanthropic funding along the way, now reaches 277 children across 20 early care and education centers. And those centers actually serve over 1,000 children, and the program also provides direct supports to more than 40 teachers to improve the quality of their work as well. And so this is really critical. I do want to note that currently in the budget, there is only 1.5 million, which is half of the investment from last year. And I know the council last year did the work to make sure we could find the other 1.5 to have a $3 million investment. This year, that has not currently been committed. So there is a risk of potentially decreased funding and significant, basically cutting in half the number of children who would be served. And just on top of that, if we go to the next slide, please. You know, there's still, even with that investment, a huge gap. Only 15% of children that need it have access to any sort of support, either through the City Seats program, through Early Head Start, or other programs. And we know there's, I mean, even with COVID and everything, there was a 700 child waiting list for that program. And we have almost 9,000 children under age 4 who don't have access to quality early care and education. And so we have an enormous need that remains. And I think we can take questions from here.
Thank you. Can you all hear me right now? Hamilton?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Banks just went off. Everything is technologically shut down on the city council side. So I'm going to continue the meeting, if that's okay. And I just have a couple quick questions. This weekend, I had the pleasure, and we're going to wait for the comment to read it. But before right now, I'm going to ask if other council members have my questions. Is I had the this weekend I met with I went out to a wonderful baby shower for the community that was put on for Black Moms of New Orleans by Black Moms of New Orleans, a wonderful grassroots organization. And Training Grounds was there that offers, you know, they can't offer the whole services, right, that early childhood education does, but they do offer training, early childhood training on how you play and interact with your child. And I think it's very valuable. And one of the things that was really compelling that she was saying is she referenced this wait list, this really long wait list of people that need early childhood education and they can't have it. And it seems to me like this is also could be part of the solution. Is that y'all's understanding as well? That we need a multi-pronged approach because we can't help everyone? Absolutely.
Training Grounds does incredible work, especially with very little resources, and has been a key partner in making, you know, in addressing this issue. Anything you want to add to that, Dr. Sonia?
Sure, I would add that, I mean, what the work that they do, as Hamilton mentioned, is just fantastic. And what it also allows us to do in a city that with limited resources is get word of mouth about the good things that need to happen in child development. And mamas to be proud and daddies to be proud and caregivers to be proud about what they're able to do with their children. And so will we have a waiting list in New Orleans for young children? Absolutely. But at least there's an alternative that's high quality, evidence-based on the science about what works for children and their brains and how they learn, change, and grow.
Yeah, I think that's really the most important thing to get out there is that age between 0 and 3 and how important that is for all of childhood development. I mean, y'all have said it, you know this is your job, but you know, as a mother, we're aware of it, but it is something that we need to really spread awareness for. And I know Councilmember Banks, I think, is going to be having them present at the next community development meeting, I think in March. Council members, are there any other people out there that would like to speak?
Christian, I just wanted to add in, I agree. Melanie and the team with the training grounds are amazing. I've been at their site prior to running for office. You know, play dates is always something that is really fun for parents. And many times, you know, we don't know how to interact with our kids. And so training ground does a really great job at retraining us as parents that we can play with our children, and that many times play is education, and it's also learning as well. But Hamilton, let me ask you a question. So you stated, so I know the city council been very committed in supporting early childhood. And so correct me if I'm wrong, you guys got the 1.5 million and we still owe you 1.5 million for 2021. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
The original plan was that the millage that was up, the millage renewal package would fill that gap, but it didn't pass. Okay.
And the second part is, have we had any movement, or have you guys done any additional work in reference to getting I know that my colleagues has interacted with the New Orleans public school system to really encourage them and that they need to be at the table to fund early childhood as well. Has there been any additional work to really encourage them to?
No significant progress on that front in the recent 6-9 months.
Okay. All right. This just needed some clarification.
Yeah.
To piggyback on what Councilmember Wynn says, are y'all also working with the state legislators to see if at the state level we can force them to cover costs on early childhood education as well and really treat this holistically? Because it just seems to me we're treating education of our children in a very fragmented way that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? I was incredibly disheartened years ago when the charter schools opted out of pre-K education, which I'm still horrified over.
You're breaking up a little bit, Councilmember Palmer, but I want to let Libby respond to that because she's been leading a lot of the state efforts.
Sure. So we work very closely with the State Department of Education surrounding early care and education because they are the lead agency in the state related to young children birth to 4. And so there's several things going on. It's using COVID response dollars to make sure that we shore up the childcare industry, because if we lose providers, we won't be able to serve the children that we need to. So that's one area. Additionally, our delegation from New Orleans and elsewhere in the state as well is really thinking about and talking about, there's this early education fund and how we get money into that fund so that when New Orleans comes up with 1.5 or $3 million, that there's money in this fund that can match dollar for dollar. So if you have $3 million coming from New Orleans, that there could potentially be another $3 million coming from the state, so that you can do this. What you're saying is really an integrated approach to caring for young children and educating them, because quality matters. And so we're always engaged in those conversations and really thinking about how do we get money into that fund. As Hamilton knows, it's a constant conversation with state legislators, with our delegation here in New Orleans, as well as the State Department of Education. I would be remiss if I do not mention in this forum that, we passed in November, 55 out of 64 parishes passed sports betting. And so one of the things that we're really working towards right now is to get revenue from the sports betting allocated to the fund, so that then there is match money when places like New Orleans show up for young children, that they can get the match funding they need from the state. Anything else you would add, Hamilton?
Just that in the last 3 years, we've gotten other sources of that fee. Thought, one of those was attached to Harrah's and their revenue, but because of COVID, that was impacted and the money didn't ultimately get to the fund. Like, the money wasn't there to go into the fund. So, we're obviously continuing to figure every possible way we can get more and more money into that fund, so that every dollar we put in locally gets matched. And I would just highlight, it requires federal investment, it requires state investment, it requires local investment, it requires early care and education centers, it requires families. And, our vision is really that we do everything we can by children with every resource we have across those. And so, appreciate the work you all have done and know that there's more ahead.
Colleague, Kristen, thank you. I'm back on. I know that we lost a portion of the presentation to the public, so we will have the slideshow placed on the council's website. And I want to apologize to all of you for the technical difficulties, because again, we lost a good bit of it. You could hear it if you were a part of the Zoom, but you couldn't hear it if you were listening on the television. So we will get that posted. Colleagues, did you have any other questions?
I do, Jay. Hamilton, just on the funding for early childhood, has the initiative or the group has thought about starting a movement to establish an MFP for early childhood program, like K to 12?
Yeah, we've had some discussion about it, because I think you bring up a really important point, right? Which is that as soon as a child gets to kindergarten, there is a reliable public funding source for that child until they get to college. And we are in a situation where we consistently, as a state and really as a nation, piecemeal together how we provide funding for early care and education, even though that is the most critical time of brain development. So the vision of having something that is like an MFP, I think, would be incredible. And we've certainly been talking about how to create it. We know there's challenges with if in fact it is the MFP that currently funds K-12, how we would actually effectively move that down for younger children. We've had some conversations. I wouldn't say we have a plan. I think there's still actually would be a lot to work through to have that be feasible.
Now, I voted for the gambling just because of early childhood, because I feel like this is a great source of funding. So I was just thinking that that since there's a potential funding sources to this gambling once it's all set up, won't it make sense for the group to really work toward establishing an MFP? Because I really believe there'll be buku of money in that funds that could really put a large dent into our early childhood education. And it makes good sense for the group to have something established, on that way we can advocate, the amount of money that we needed, instead of putting that money into funds and then providing a match, depending on local government providing the resources.
I think you're absolutely correct. And I think that one of the things that we all need to think through in this space is what the formulary would look like. So if you think about our 4-year-olds currently in the state that are in the LA4 or 4-year-old program, every year we have to defend that money so that doesn't get cut. And we serve over 90% of our 4-year-olds in the state of Louisiana that are at risk. We serve less than 15% of our birth to 3-year-olds. We have to do something different. We have to think radically. We need to get money into that fund. And once we can get that fund going, then we can really think about the formulary of how we need to move forward and leverage our federal resources. Because especially when you all have shown up and we've shown up in as New Orleanians and said, children are important to us. We want them to thrive. But state, you've got to figure this out too. And that's where we're in that space right now, is working with the state to help figure it out. What's the formulary look like so that we're actually covering the true cost of care? Because as you all know, it's expensive to provide care to young children. It costs more than college tuition does. And so we want to make sure that our providers are able to cover the cost of care so that they can remain open and take more children, and particularly take more infants and toddlers.
And
I was going to just add in that I really think that we need to have that information accessible and ready. So when there's funding opportunity, like the state and the federal government, and like even this future gambling fund that will be established, then at least we know the amount that we need. Because I'm pretty sure every group will be targeting that gambling funds to fund it. But if we don't get our numbers together, then we're going to basically get some, and then we still have a gap. I guess for me is we've been talking about early childhood for such a long time, even prior to me going into council, and it'll be really great. And I think many of you guys have indicated, we keep saying that our children are our priorities, and we really need to stand up and to really, and we got to do this for them. So I think that, again, whatever I can do to help, I'm a big fan of early childhood. I think you guys know that 100%. So whatever I can do, I definitely want to be at that space to have those dialogue and engagement.
That's great. Thank you, Councilmember Nguyen. And, I'll just add, 2 points. One is that Training Grounds is actually a partner in the City Seats program. They help with the parent and provider training for the children who are enrolled in that. I didn't make that clear earlier. And then, to note that we have been working with Emily Wolf in the Office of Youth and Families and the Mayor's administration, and they have committed to providing the additional 1.5 million to have the program be whole, but we're not yet clear and haven't seen exactly where that's coming from and how.
All right, colleagues, any further questions? I know we had one public comment, Jenna.
Yes, sir. There are 2 quick public comments.
I'm sorry, there were 2. I'm sorry.
No worries. The first is from Dr. Keith Lederman with Kingsley House, not a paid representative. Dear Chairman Banks and members of the Criminal Justice Committee, thanks so much for your special focus today on early childhood development and education. As you know, the earlier we start putting infants and toddlers on the path to healthy development and lifelong success, the better. As we also all know too well, the consequences of not doing so are dire, most especially for children coming from economically poor families, which is why what you are doing at the Criminal Justice Committee is so vitally important toward continuing the City Seats program and expanding upon the city's investment in quality early childhood education so that all of our children, of our communities, infants and toddlers and their families can truly thrive. Thanks again, and please know that we here at Kingsley House are ready, willing, and able to help you in any ways needed. Second public comment is from Jillian Delos Reyes with the New Orleans Campaign for Grade Level Reading, not a paid representative. Thank you to this committee and our council for delving into the conversation of the connection between early childhood and the many systems that impact a child's life, like criminal justice. This is a cross-sector issue that must be approached with cross-sector solutions. And that's the end of public comment for this item.
Thank you, Jenna. Just in closing, before we adjourn the meeting, I just wanted to make the statement that for those who are questioning why we're talking about early childhood education in relationship to criminal justice, it's because every dollar you invest in education is a dollar less you will have to spend on incarceration. It makes more sense to invest in our children, educating them, than it does incarcerating them. Crime fighting is far bigger than just hiring police or new police cars. We will never arrest our way out of crime. We've got to stop creating criminals. We've got to give our kids an opportunity to have a realistic chance at success. One of the ways to ensure that is to have them prepared when they get to school. Now, every study that you're going to find supports that concept. It's very simple. If we invest early, we will not have to waste money on locking people up late. It is just as simple as that. So for those of you who are questioning why this is here, it's here for that reason. And we will continue to try to move this because we've got to run on parallel tracks. Now, it's no doubt that we've got crime today that has to be addressed, but we've also got to be forward looking to make sure that we can cut the spigot off moving down the road. That's what this early child education piece is about. It won't actually fix the problem today. That's a different track. Now, very intentional about addressing that, but we've got to run on two tracks. Deal with it today and stop creating criminals for tomorrow. So with that, if there are no further questions, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Can I get a second? All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you all. Please wear a mask, save a life, and as soon as you get a chance, get your vaccine. Thank you all and be safe.